65 at the end of the year. I just figured it was a good time to step away and go do something else. I won't be stepping away from the game, just dropping the mic or dropping the headset, as you said, Damon, and stepping away from the announcing world.
His wife finally said it out loud. The tormented life that the world thought it understood was never the full story. At 65, Ian Baker Finch has stepped away from the microphone, away from the road, and away from the only identity he allowed himself to carry for 30 years. And what Jenny revealed about why he stayed gone for so long changes everything you thought you knew about one of golf's most beloved figures. Here is a man who lifted the Claret Jug in front of the world. Here is that same man, years later, standing on the widest fairway in all of golf, hitting a hook out of bounds onto a road. The distance between those two moments is not just measured in yards, it is measured in silence, in darkened hotel rooms, in thousands of strange letters, in a family learning to dread seeing their father come home. It is measured in tears shed in a locker room at Royal Troon with a wife beside him and no words left to fight with. This is not a sad story, but it does not pretend the pain was small. It does not skip over the years that nearly broke him. This is a story about what happens after the storm. This is a story about a man who lost everything and then quietly became something greater than he ever was before. If this kind of comeback moves you, tap hype on this video. It helps push the story out to more golf fans who need to hear it. Now let's go back to where it all began. The year is 1991. Royal Birkdale, a 30-year-old Australian with a wide smile and a fluid swing, steps onto the grandest stage in the sport. Ian Baker Finch had a nickname that suited him perfectly. They called him the Dark Shark. It was a nod to his heritage and a quiet tribute to his fellow Australian Greg Norman. The name had teeth. It suggested precision. It suggested danger. And in that July week at Royal Birkdale, he was both of those things and more. He opened with rounds of 71 and 71. Steady, controlled. The kind of rounds that keep you in the conversation without drawing too much attention. Then came Saturday. He went out and carded a 64. It was a round so clean and so fearless that it launched him straight into a share of the lead. The golfing world took notice. Then came Sunday. Facing the full weight of a major championship final round, with every eye trained on him, he shot 66. His weekend total of 130 stands as one of the most extraordinary back-to-back performances the Open Championship has ever seen. 13 under par over the entire weekend. Pure, complete dominance on the links. When he lifted the Claret Jug, he called it the pinnacle of his life. It was his 17th professional victory. It made him a global ambassador for the sport. He was beloved. He was respected. He was the Dark Shark, and the ocean felt like it belonged to him. But the trophy had barely been put away before something shifted. As a major champion, Baker Finch felt a new pressure building inside him. The game was changing around him. Players like John Daly were bombing it past everyone. Distance was becoming the new currency of professional golf. And Baker Finch, a man who had won with precision and timing, began to feel that his game needed to evolve. He started chasing power. He started tinkering with a swing that had just beaten the best players in the world. That decision would cost him everything. What followed was not a sudden collapse. It was a tragedy in slow motion. He remained competitive briefly, finishing 19th at the 1992 Open. But the cracks were forming. The confidence that had carried him through Birkdale began to erode. The swing changes that were meant to unlock more distance instead unlocked something far more destructive. What the world came to see as the yips was not a simple case of nerves. It was a total breakdown of motor control, the body forgetting what it had always known. A major champion standing over a golf ball and having absolutely no idea where it was going. The yips did not just ruin his golf game, they rewired his relationship with the world. Jenny, his wife, has spoken in recent years about what those mid-90 years felt like inside their home in Orlando. When Ian would come back from a tournament after missing the cut, which became a regular occurrence, he would disappear into his room for hours in total silence. It was not the silence of a man who was angry. It was the silence of a man who was completely lost. He could not explain to Jenny what was happening. He could not explain it to himself. A swing that had won a major had violently deserted him, and he had no language for that grief. He retreated inward to protect his family from the depth of what he was feeling. But the retreat only made the loneliness worse. He was carrying it alone in a house full of people who loved him. And then there was the world outside that house. Because Baker Finch was so well known and so well liked, the public could not look away from his struggle. The media treated every appearance like a public death watch. Every missed cut was documented. Every errant drive was noted. And because Ian Baker Finch was, at his core, a man who was too nice to say no, he kept showing up. He kept fronting the cameras. He kept signing autographs and answering questions, even as his psyche was being quietly dismantled behind his eyes. Jenny noted that his personality worked against him during this period. His humility and his genuine refusal to be unkind to strangers meant he could never step back and create the space he desperately needed. He could not protect himself because protecting himself would have meant disappointing someone. And Ian Baker Finch did not disappoint people. The cruelest twist of this period came in the form of kindness. Because he was so beloved, fans desperately wanted to fix him. Thousands of letters arrived at the family home. Not hate mail, not criticism. Letters from well-meaning people who thought they had the answer. Some of them sent magic rocks for him to carry in his pocket. Others recommended mud baths, insisting that physical blockages were causing the problem. Every single letter, no matter how warm-hearted, delivered the same brutal message. The whole world sees that you are broken. For a man already drowning in self-doubt, the sympathy made it worse. The attention made the silence heavier. Between 1995 and 1996, across 29 PGA Tour starts, he did not make a single cut. Not one. His best results were missed cuts, withdrawals, and disqualifications. The Dark Shark, the man who had shot 64 and 66 on the back end of a major, could not find a fairway. And then came St. Andrews. The 1995 Open Championship was held at the Old Course at St. Andrews, the home of golf. The first hole at St. Andrews has the widest fairway in the sport, nearly 100 yards across. For most tour professionals, finding that fairway is so routine it barely registers as a thought. For Ian Baker Finch, standing on that tee in front of the world, it became the site of his most infamous moment. He hit a severe hook that crossed the boundary fence and landed on the road, out of bounds, on the widest fairway in golf. He later tried to explain it as a 25-yard hook made worse by 30-mile-per-hour winds. And there is truth in that. But the symbolic damage was already done. He was no longer just a struggling former champion. He had become the public face of the YIPS, a cautionary tale, a figure that fans felt equal parts pity and fascination for. That image, a major winner unable to find a fairway 100 yards wide, followed him everywhere. The lowest point came 2 years later. The 1997 Open Championship at Royal Troon. Baker Finch had almost not entered. He sensed that his game was not fit for a major, but he entered anyway. The first round was played in howling 40-mile-per-hour winds. He hit drive after drive into the thick, punishing rough. He could not control the ball. He could not trust his swing. He could not trust his hands. By the time he walked off the 18th green, he had carded a 92, 21 over par. A score that was statistically one of the most staggering ever posted by a former major champion in a major. In the locker room afterward, with Jenny beside him and his coach Gary Edwin nearby, he finally stopped fighting the truth he had been carrying for 5 years. He told the media 4 words. He said, "I am finished. I am going home." And with that, Ian Baker Finch retired from professional competitive golf. The tormented life had reached its floor. But here is where the story changes direction. On that same afternoon at Royal Troon, after the tears had settled and the weight of the decision had landed, Baker Finch did something remarkable. He walked into the commentary booth. On the very day he retired as a player, he began his life as a broadcaster. It was not planned in any grand sense, but it was instinctive, and it turned out to be the most important walk he ever took. Over the next 30 years, the last 19 of which were with CBS Sports, Ian Baker Finch became one of the most beloved voices in the sport. The man the golfing world had watched fall apart on the course became the man they turned to for warmth, insight, and wisdom in the booth. His colleagues and fans gave him a new name. They called him Finchy. And Finchy was different from every other analyst in the business. The difference was pain. Baker Finch had lived through the worst that professional golf can do to a human being. When a player on the course was struggling, he did not reach for easy criticism. He reached for empathy. He knew what it felt like to stand over a ball in front of thousands of people and have your body refuse to cooperate. He knew what it felt like to walk off a course and not be able to explain yourself to the people who loved you most. That knowledge made him different. He became what those around him described as the encourager-in-chief. He lifted players through the screen. He made watching golf feel like being in the company of someone who genuinely understood what it cost to compete at that level. He called legendary moments. He was there for Adam Scott's 2013 Masters victory. He was there for Tiger Woods' stunning 2019 triumph. He gave 30 years of weekends and flights and early mornings and late nights to the sport that had once broken him. And somewhere in all of that, he found a version of peace. But Jenny's recent revelation adds a layer to this second act that changes how it reads. For all those 30 years on the road, she shares that Ian's constant movement was, in part, a way to escape the ghosts of his playing career. By staying in the spotlight as a broadcaster, he could rewrite his story every single weekend. He could replace the image of the man who lost his swing with the sound of the voice of golf. The road was not just work. The road was also refuge. He was away from his family for 20 to 25 weekends every year. He was a nomad of the game. And while that time produced remarkable professional moments, it was still a form of loneliness. A quieter kind, a chosen kind, but loneliness nonetheless. His 2 daughters, Haley and Laura, had grown up during the darkest years associating their father coming home early with bad news on the golf course. Ian had tried to be the fun parent during those years. He became what Jenny describes as Mr. Disney, trying to shield them from the depth of what he was going through. He was the man performing joy for the people he loved most, while quietly falling apart. That pattern of being away, of being on the move, of pouring himself into a role that kept him close to the game but at a safe distance from its worst memories continued through 3 decades of broadcasting. The road had become the escape, and the escape had been necessary for a long time. But the 65-year milestone has changed everything. Following the 2025 Wyndham Championship, Ian Baker Finch officially retired from the CBS broadcast booth. It was the end of a 30-year chapter. A chapter built on resilience, warmth, and the quiet courage of a man who chose to stay connected to the thing that had once destroyed his confidence. At 65, he is stepping away, not because the road wore him out, but because he has finally made peace with what he was running from. Jenny put it simply, Ian is ready to trade the spotlight for 23 more weekends a year at home. For a man who has spent his entire adult life in the service of a global game, that is a radical and beautiful shift. Think about what 23 weekends means to a man who gave most of them away. It means Saturday mornings without a flight to catch. It means Sunday afternoons watching golf from a couch instead of a tower. It means being fully present, not as a broadcaster or a former champion, just as a husband and grandfather who finally has nowhere else to be. He is no longer on the road to outrun his past. He is at home to embrace what comes next, specifically his grandchildren. Jenny says the luxury of time is what excites him most. The ability to travel for pleasure instead of obligation, to be present without a microphone, to simply be a grandfather. This change has rippled through the landscape of golf broadcasting. CBS has confirmed that Colt Knost, a former PGA Tour professional himself, will take Baker Finch's place in the Super Tower beginning in the 2026 season. Knost represents a new generation of analysts. He steps into a significant role, but he steps into a space that Baker Finch carved out through 3 decades of genuine humanity. The quiet void left by Finchy is a real one. He was not just an analyst, he was the moral center of the broadcast team. And even now, Baker Finch is not walking away from golf entirely. He has turned his attention toward golf course design, a passion that stretches back to his childhood growing up in rural Queensland. He has described himself as the barefoot boy on a tractor. He is returning to that version of himself, moving away from the noise and the schedule and the pressure of the PGA Tour calendar and towards something more creative, more personal, more his own. A third act that belongs entirely to him. So now look at the full picture. The tormented life that the headline promised, the one his wife finally revealed the full truth about, was never the simple story the world assumed it was. The loneliness of his 30s was dark and involuntary. It was the loneliness of a man who could not explain his own hands, who sat in hotel rooms in silence because he had no words for what was happening to him, who watched thousands of well-meaning letters arrive and felt each one confirm that he was broken in front of the entire world. But the loneliness of his 60s is something completely different. It is chosen. It is light. The same silence that once pressed down on him in those mid-90s hotel rooms has been transformed into the quiet of a home he finally has time to fill. The dark shark who lifted the Claret Jug became the man who could not find a fairway. The man who could not find a fairway became the voice who helped millions of fans find their love for the game. And the voice who spent 30 years on the road has now chosen to come home and stay home. That is not a tormented life. That is a redeemed one. And it took real courage to get there. It took the courage to keep competing when every round was painful. It took the courage to walk into a commentary booth on the lowest day of his life. It took the courage to stay on the road for 30 years while quietly carrying the weight of a career that had broken him. And it took the courage to finally put that weight down. His legacy is pure class and genuine resilience. He will always be the 1991 Open champion. He will always be the man who shot 64 and 66 on the weekend to win at Royal Birkdale. But he will also always be the man who kept showing up when showing up took more courage than any golf shot ever could. The man who walked into a commentary booth on the worst day of his professional life and found salvation. The encourager-in-chief who used his own scars to lift everyone around him. At 65, Ian Baker Finch is finally, fully dictating his own pace. The ghosts of Birkdale and Troon are not chasing him anymore. He has sat with them long enough. He has made his peace. And the silence that once defined his loneliness has become the sound of a life finally his own. If this story moved you, leave a comment below and tell us which part hit you the hardest. Subscribe so you never miss another story like this one, and share it with someone who loves the game.